Good. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Thank you also for being able to adjust our normal weekly schedule back 1 week. This is technically our April APP3 meeting, even though it is the first week in May. But again, thank you all for having flexible schedules and being able to join with us today. This is the very first meeting that we have with our new co-chairs, the US and GSAC. So let's go ahead and get started. I will share the agenda and walk through really quick, and then I will pass it over to our chairs. So for the first couple of minutes, we will be doing just a quick meeting overview and roll call, which I'm doing now. Then we have our introductory remarks from the incoming 2023 co-chairs. For the GHSA consortium, we'll have Jennifer Ambe giving those remarks, and for the US, we will have Erin J. from DoD. Then we will start discussing and drafting the 2023 APP3 work plan. Then we'll have a session on biosafety and biosecurity during public health emergencies. And then we will open the floor to everyone just to give any updates on any programmatics, any upcoming meetings that they would want to promote to the group. So for roll call, during the survey that we had earlier in the year, we had several people comment that they would not like to do roll call anymore and just put their name and affiliation in the chat. So we can definitely, we definitely heard your feedback, and we will start moving towards that for attendance. So if everyone can please just put their first name, last name, and affiliation in the chat. If you work a government, can you also please put your government in that title as well? So please don't just put like Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because I don't know which Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So that will be very, very helpful. So you can just start populating that in the chat. I will take attendance that way and reflect it in the meeting notes. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Sapna and Jennifer.
Fantastic, Gabby. Thank you so much. So good morning, everyone. My name is Sapna Vora, and I support the United States Department of Defense, more specifically their Cooperative Threat Reduction Policy Team. So as Gabby noted, we are so thrilled to open up this meeting as one of the new co-chairs for this year. So you're going to hear more from my director, Erin J, shortly, but since we are equal partners in this with our GHSA consortium colleagues, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Jennifer Ambe to provide some opening remarks. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sapna Vora. Barka, Karibu, greetings all, and welcome. Co-chairs, former chairs, and colleagues. On behalf of the GHSA consortium, we would once again like to recognize the work done under the leadership of the former chairs, CARFA, Uganda, and the Africa CDC. Dr. Isa, Dr. Maruta, Mr. Babi Gomira, we will continue to call on you for advice and suggestions in an effort to draw on the experience and mentorship provided by you, and also for the continuity of the work done under this action package. Thank you. Colleagues, some of you may not know much about the Global Health Security Agenda Consortium, but I will be brief. GSAC is made up of member organizations. Some of the organizations have been active since the creation of the GHSA, and from those member organizations, there are individuals who are most often volunteers on the action packages and task forces. We believe that these volunteer members are a valuable resource as they do this work in addition to their regular day jobs because they're passionate about it. Our nonprofit consortium is pleased to have been given the opportunity and what we view as a very unique chance to work in collaboration with the US Department of Defense to provide, and I'll use my own wording here, a different lens or another perspective, so to speak, with reference to the importance of the non-governmental sector in supporting the GHSA to achieve the goals of the GHSA 2024, and of course, the next stage of the agenda to 2028. We believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. Not only do we believe in it, we actually practice it. We support the inclusion of nonprofits, academia, and civil society who work on the ground in many countries, like our newest members of the consortium, Makerere University, the Indian Institute of Public Health, Gandhinagar, Africa Health Budget Network, and the Guinean Association for Biosecurity and Biosafety. To top that, we are an all-female GSAC board. I'm sure if Dana Perkins is on, she'll be happy to hear this. The three of us, Samantha Dietrich with Merrick, Julie Fisher with CRDF, me with WCAPS, are representing the leadership of our consortium on this action package. We've had some extremely engaging and really rich conversations with the Director for the Cooperative Threat Reduction Policy, Mr. Aaron J., Dr. Sapna, and the DoD team, in which DEIA was part of an enlightening discussion. It's really amazing to hear what the DoD is doing. They have a program initiated by the director, but it's an internal program. So it's clear that he is truly invested in making that change. During our APP3 leadership discussions with the US DoD, it soon became evident, and it was really easy to find common ground as we built our list for kind of like our wish list for APP3 on specific objectives. We believe that with GSAC and the US DoD co-chairing this action package, we're sending a strong message on military-civil collaborations, and we aim to highlight these possibilities for global engagement. We have practical examples and shared experiences as CSOs that show how the non-governmental sector have brought ministries and agencies within the same governments together to have those meaningful discussions and planning in order to work towards country and regional goals. You will see that we have some thematic areas which Gabby and Jacob did a great job of capturing from our leadership discussions. They're actually included in the strategic planning recommendations document. Some areas we hope that we will engage in are the obvious one, which is encouraging military-civil engagement, emerging technologies, biosurveillance, advocacy and communication to include addressing mis and disinformation, enhancing and encouraging more global South engagement, and also South-South partnerships. We are very sensitive to that and have had several discussions on what we think that should look like. We look forward to the discussions on moderate to high containment level containment labs in areas of conflict, such as the Horn of Africa, Lake Chad Basin, and across the Sahel, as well as those who are threatened when there are natural disasters or emergencies. We are hoping to address the importance of clear paths for threat mitigation and looking forward to this discussion later on. Fellow co-chairs, Mr. J, Dr. Vora, and the US DoD team, NTI, and all of you on the meeting today, I just want to let you know that the GSAC is committed to listening to your voices, collaborating with you, and supporting the goals of APP3 and the GHSA. Asante Sana, thank you. Over to you, Dr. Sapna.
Thanks, Jennifer, so much. That's wonderful. Aaron, if you are ready, I can now turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sapna. First, thanks to this entire group for having me. I know that this is potentially a partnership with the Department of, the U.S. Department of Defense on global health security. Might seem like a bit of an awkward fit. I'd like to take a little bit of time today to just sort of talk through why we don't think that that's true, why the synergies are just really there, and how we can help one another, because we honestly are trying to achieve the same goals. But first, before we dig into that, I just want to thank the outgoing co-chairs, Uganda and the Africa CDC. It is a real pleasure and an honor to be able to inherit this group from you. You've got our commitment to continue that very good work and to build upon it. So again, thank you very much, and please accept our apologies for taking as long as we did to transition over to us. As I'm sure you will not be surprised to hear, the Department of Defense always takes too long to do even simple things. So, but thank you very, very much for that. Jennifer, thank you for the very kind words. And I could not agree with you more across the full breadth of what you said. We are excited to be sharing this co-chairmanship with you. And I cannot think of a better group of people to be that other lens with us. Because as I said, we are trying to achieve the same things. But we do look at the world in a different way from one another. But that diversity of viewpoint is just absolutely critical. So thank you. I do want to pull the thread a little bit on something that Jennifer hit on, just because it is so important, both the Department of Defense and for me personally, and that's diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So Jennifer is correct. I am the founder and the inaugural co-chair of my office's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. It's an internal kind of thing. The idea is to make sure that we have voices at the table and are not excluding anyone. That this is, this kind of work is, based entirely on expertise, and expertise grows in different places, and different people have different variants of it, and we need it all to tackle these kinds of problems. And so for our part, for DoD's part, expect us to push forward on DEIA in this group in whatever way we can. It's really hard, obviously, but that's not an excuse to not do things. One conversation that Jennifer and I had early on was about making sure that we have more options for folks who don't speak English or not at a working level. So so we're very eager to do that. But also please do, if you've got ideas on ways that we can fully leverage the combined international talent pool that's available to us under this action package, please do let us know. I hope that in our time as co-chair, we can kind of demonstrate that the DoD is actually not dictatorial, that we're very collegial and operate on a consensus principle, and we're going to bring that approach here as well. And just to point out on DEIA, I mean, what we mean by that is, for all, what we in the United States would call protected categories, race, gender, sexual orientation, we need you all, and you are welcome here. And so if there is, if there are things that we can do to help raise your voice, please tell us. Again, just a piece on the collaboration bit. It's really important to us. Again, DoD sees the world from a very, one particular lens, and we're going to talk a little bit about it in a minute. But I want to just be clear that that lens does not preclude all of the other lenses that are out there, and we need, we need that parallax, to see, the object from different angles so that we understand it from a three-dimensional perspective. So, so again, you've got our commitment to do exactly that. First, let me just before I go forward, just do a quick introduction to the folks that we've got represented from DoD here today. Ordinarily, I would ask them to kind of go and introduce themselves, but I know that we've got a lot of business to attend to, and there are a lot of us. So first, Aaron J. I am the Director for Cooperative Threat Reduction Policy in the U.S. Department of Defense. I sit under the Office of the Secretary of Defense. To my right, off screen, as he is wont to do, is my Deputy Director for Cooperative Threat Reduction Policy, Phil Newton, Dr. Vora, who you already know, Olivia Ione, who also works on my team and has some deep background on biological biosafety and biosecurity capacity building work. Rick Peterson, a great colleague from one of our sister offices, Vanessa Eddy, and Stephanie Petzing, round out the OSD crew. We also are privileged to have folks from the Defense Threat Reduction Agency's Biological Threat Reduction Program joining us, and we're going to be kind of working hand in glove with them throughout our chairmanship process. They are Deidre Williams, Karina Monaghan, and Rebecca Dunfree, brilliant minds for biological threat reduction work, and we are lucky to have their expertise supporting the work that we're hoping to kind of do together over the next several months. So I kept promising to say it, talk about it. So here we go. Why DoD? I think that there are several folks probably on the line while are politely kind of wondering, you know, Americans host APP3, got it, understand that, but DoD, come on. So let's start by taking kind of a step back and tell a little bit of a story, but it'll start from a week ago. This is going to sound unrelated, but it'll get there, I promise. So last week, actually, I went to Kazakhstan and toured the Semipalatinsk test site. So this is the primary testing ground that the Soviet Union used to develop and test its nuclear weapons. The place is, I mean, striking, just like the power and just like the awful effects of these weapons, both their potential effect on the global community, but also the people who live nearby. Folks in the town nearby, Semipalatinsk, they're still suffering from birth defects after atmospheric tests that happened in the 50s and the 60s. So what the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, as overseen by my office and implemented by DITRA, is secure those pieces of those radiological materials that were created and left in the ground from nuclear weapons tests, and make sure that they can't be used, dug back up, and used to build a weapon, either an actual nuclear weapon or a dirty bomb or something like that. And that includes things like putting, taking pieces of radiological material, taking it away and storing it, for the Kazakhstanis. But in Kazakhstani facilities, we, where it's just impossible to take it away, we put cement, call them sarcophagi, caps on the ground to make it harder for folks to get into it and to kind of proliferate these materials. And and we also train and equip the Kazakhstani National Guard to be able to secure those sites themselves. So that's how the program started 30 years ago. After the fall of the Soviet Union, we were largely a nuclear focused program. But we quickly realized that biological weapons left over from the fall of the Soviet Union were equally problematic. There are anecdotes of folks finding weaponized anthrax spores just sort of tossed in a closet somewhere and abandoned when these facilities were abandoned. So it was it became a major part of what we do to find those biological agents and help our partners, including the Russian Federation at the time, eliminate them. After the September 11th attacks, it became of paramount importance for the United States to ensure that weapons of mass destruction don't fall in the hands of terrorist organizations. But immediately after 9/11, there was the anthrax attack on the United States Capitol that really kind of hammered home the need to tackle biological threats. Then, as we kind of dug in, we kind of realized that the skill sets required to detect and attribute a biological weapon are by and large the same skill sets and capabilities to detect and attribute naturally occurring pathogens. And further realized that unsurveyed regions with kind of high concentrations of dangerous pathogens, it's basically potentially a WMD feedstock. So it is of paramount necessity for us to work with partners to be able to detect and understand the endemic disease profile in those countries. So that has become a big part of what we do, and it's kind of culminated in a lot of ways in 2020 when a CTOR supported lab in Thailand was credited with the first detection of COVID-19 outside of China. So it's important, it works. And as this group doesn't need to be reminded, it saves lives. But getting back to biosafety and biosecurity in particular, so I knew this on an intellectual level going to Kazakhstan next week, but it really hammered home the fact that that very similar to these nuclear test sites where there are just diseases in the ground, in their own way, high containment labs that still need help to achieve international biosafety and biosecurity standards, those are also an awful proliferation risk. And in some ways, more concerning just because of the transmissible nature of infectious disease. So that's why we're here. And that's why we're in this line of work. Why we wanted to co-chair this group in particular. Why not just sort of sit in the back, do our thing, and just sort of let the international community do its work. In truth, the trend lines, the macroeconomic incentives, and emerging technologies are such that these threats are becoming ever more present and diverse and concerning. So I'll give you one example, and it's one area that I hope that this group will help address during the next several months, and that's cybersecurity. It is increasingly possible for the right cyber incursion to the right facility to achieve a WMD-like effect. But more than that too, it's the fact that things like additive manufacturing have meant that you don't need to actually transport dangerous materials from point A to point B through maritime routes or air routes. You just need the data to be able to create it on your own. And things like that are increasingly becoming not just emerging technologies, but emerged technologies. These are here, and we as the international community need to work together to figure out a way to harness the miraculous power of these new technologies while mitigating the potential dangerous risks. Another point that the incentives that countries are seeing coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic is causing a greater proliferation of high containment laboratories. So more and more countries are going to need support from groups like this to address biosafety and biosecurity concerns, and that's why this group is so important, and that's why we were so eager to join it. So that's the end of my prepared remarks. However, I will go briefly off script for just a moment, and let's see why this is important for me personally. Let's see if I can make this. Here we go. There we go. See that? So that is my 15-month-old son, Benjamin. So little guy, first kiddo, and just so love him unconditionally. On Monday, little guy had a seizure, and don't worry. I mean, it turned out fine. It's just like a thing that happens to some kids. There are no long-term impacts from it, but just like the sheer unmitigated terror of getting a call from daycare saying, "Hi, your kids had to be taken in an ambulance to the emergency room because he had a seizure and we don't know anything more." It hammers home just that parental that primal need to protect the people you love. And so when I take a look at things like the Semipalatinsk test site with nuclear material still not fully secured, or chemical agents from a long ago war that's still sitting out in a field somewhere, and yes, high containment laboratories that still need help achieving biosafety and biosecurity standards. Every single one of those things is in their way an opportunity for innocent people to die. Innocent people like my kid over there. And so what this group does is help eliminate those opportunities. So I want to first thank you for that. Thank you for the work that you do. But then also just say that I could not be more honored to share in this work with you. It's important. It really, really is. And the threats, as I said, are growing, and we help stem that tide. So thank you. And again, this is that's the lens through which both DoD sees this problem set and the way I personally see it. There are other lenses out there, and they're all equally valid, but this is ours. So that's my bit. What else? What do I got to do now?
No, thanks, Aaron. That was perfect. I guess maybe we can pause if anyone in the group has sort of questions or reactions that they'd like to offer to our co-chairs that you've heard from both of us before we dive into a discussion on our work plan drafting. So let me pause just for a moment and see if anyone would like to make an intervention. Jennifer, please.
Yes, I just want to say thank you for sharing on such a personal level. And most of us here, obviously, I can think of several of us are really, really invested in this, and especially for the generations to come. But more importantly, from this perspective of this action package, one of the things that we had discussed was, the almighty US and the DoD and the US agenda. But this just, that was why I made the comment about us having a different lens and also sort of balancing it out, because we are made up of global organizations. I personally am from the global south and from an area of conflict. So that's usually my perspective. But I just want to say thank you for making it real. We're all one humanity and we're all working, towards the same goals. So I really appreciate that coming from the US DoD. Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Okay, great. If no one else, and of course, feel free to use the chat if you'd like to offer comments and such throughout our conversation. So as you heard previewed from our co-chairs, we have taken in a lot of the feedback that this group has offered in surveys, not just from the most recent surveys that our NTI colleagues issued, but really kind of what we've been hearing from the group for the past several years of sort of what are you looking for in terms of sort of priority issue areas, what should we be working on, but also how this group should be functioning. So we wanted to take some time during this meeting to sort of hit some of those or I should say to offer some of what we were considering, again, as co-chairs and based on your feedback, these sort of priority issue areas that we think that this group can focus on for our work plan. And then I'll also turn it over to Sam from GSAC to give a sort of a preview or some thoughts on kind of how we think this group can sort of have an opportunity to do more outside of these, once a month meetings. So maybe then to start with the issues set. So Jennifer kind of hit the sort of wave tops of these a little bit earlier, but in looking at the feedback that you all got provided and sort of the conversations that we were having, and in particular, considering the fact that it's not just the US government in the seat here as a co-chair, but it's our Department of Defense in particular. There's sort of the three areas that we thought would be interesting for this group, and I'll also drop them into the chat after verbally briefing them. So the first is, not surprisingly, and this is not in priority order, but encouraging military-civil engagement or collaboration to improve biosafety, biosecurity, but also just more broadly to be able to improve, preparedness, and then, to prevent, detect, and respond to infectious disease threats. And, some of what we were thinking about that might nest under there is really looking at some of those post-COVID analyses of, how did a multi-sectoral approach work or did it work to be able to address, the pandemic, which, emergency declarations are dropping all over the place. We're really interested if there are case studies, for example, where the defense or security sectors played a major role or where they could not play a role, right? Because of, barriers from a regulatory or other kind of perspective. Also considering the fact that, security forces or first responders or others may sometimes be those on the front line, right? Not just your health, sort of typically trained healthcare workers. And so how do we make sure that biosafety and biosecurity is really inculcated across the whole of government, right? And ideally also that kind of whole of society approach. The second issue area, and this is again, some of what was alluded to by our co-chair leadership, is to both increase awareness of, but more importantly, perhaps to incentivize actions to reduce the biosecurity and biosafety risks that are posed by emerging and advanced technologies. And so, we're tracking the developments in things like DNA synthesis, some of the sequencing and other technology, but also some of those that are not necessarily biotechnologies, but have a role to play here. And so we heard from a lot of you that, technology and wanting to help sort of get ahead of some of these concerns was really important. We totally agree with that. And as Aaron noted, we really think cybersecurity is an important component there, just recognizing how, aspects of the threat landscape and such have really evolved. And we also think that this could be an interesting area of how do we get some more of that engagement with, health decision makers, right, within governments or other leaders in a community, especially because a big part of this is partly awareness raising, right, is to recognize that, these technologies are exciting. They present a lot of promise, but they also present certain perils to society. And we want to make sure that decision makers are aware that we got to get their buy-in, right? If we actually want to really promote, again, those actions to be able to mitigate some of these concerns. And then sort of lastly, as Jennifer noted, really trying to enhance engagement from the Global South. And this includes in our biosafety, biosecurity events and engagements. And then wherever possible, how we can really help foster some of that South-South, collaboration. And, we recognize it can be really awkward for a country like ours, to sort of advocate for this and such. And we absolutely don't want to appear that we are, in any way kind of lecturing or asking others to do things that we're not willing to. But we really want to hear from you all on what those ideas, can look like, and sort of what we can do to sort of, again, foster that kind of collaboration, much of which is already occurring, right? Partly spurred by the pandemic, but also spurred by other sort of infectious disease outbreaks and other kind of recent events. And so kind of at a high level, that's what we're looking at. And part of what we also heard from you from the enhancing the Global South engagement was particularly, how can we build up some more biosafety, biosecurity in the Latin American region? And how do we also take those regional approaches, right? Whether we've got CARFA, whether we've got our Africa CDC colleagues and ASEAN and such and elsewhere. So how can we really leverage the kind of expertise those institutions and such can offer, but how do we also look not just as countries, as individuals, but also as these kind of regional units? And a big part of that too is how can we bring additional countries into the APP3 fold, right? Because we hear at times people speak up in other action packages of having this strong interest of, hey, we think that military-civil cooperation is important, we'd like to hear more, but they're not part of this group. And so one of the things that we'll be looking to you as a community is to really see, as you are sitting in on these other meetings and people that are speaking up, how can we encourage, again, more of that inclusivity in our action package, so that our colleagues can also achieve their shared priorities. So let me pause there. As I said, we'll put it in the chat, and of course we'll be sending this out to the group to look at, just to see if there are any strong reactions that folks would like to share. And again, feel free if you want to verbalize it or also drop it into the chat. So let me pause just for a moment.
So let me just, if I can, just foot stomp one particular point to round out the section, and that is, I just want to reiterate, we do want to hear your ideas. We have a lot ourselves, as you might expect, and we will need to kind of pick and choose which ones to put our efforts against, and prioritize them. But we want to hear from you. This is not the U.S. DoD show. This is an international organization that is filled with just tremendous talent, and we want to leverage the breadth of that talent. So all I would just say, do let us know if you have ideas, and we will try to include them as best we can.
Okay, so I don't see anybody jumping in immediately, but that's fine. You could always, of course, reach out to us afterwards if you've got questions, concerns, etc. So maybe then, Sam, if I can turn to you to dive a little bit more in. Oh, sorry, Julie, please.
No, sorry, I just wanted to say this is not actually adding something to the work agenda, but I know that as Sam starts talking about work streams and we begin thinking about what our work plan might be for the year, I think it would be, thank you. I think it would be fantastic to, at this point, as anyone thinks of an area that could be a priority for developing our work plan, and starting to think about both the big picture and the granular goals that we want to achieve over the next year. I would really, if it's acceptable to everyone, propose that people drop those into the chat now as a beginning, understanding it's only a beginning. and that we will be moving on and building on those as we iteratively develop a work plan that we can achieve this year and lay a foundation for future years.
That's perfect. Thank you. Yes, please. Absolutely. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sepna. So yeah, I think just adding on to what Dr. Sepna said and Julie said too, obviously we've got these three areas of focus, but they're pretty broad, right? So I think that there's ways to kind of break those areas down, certainly. So welcome ideas for breaking those areas down, or just gathering thoughts overall for each of those areas, as well as certainly sharing additional ideas that folks might have. We're certainly open and flexible, if that was not clear already. But one of the things certainly that we thought about as we move forward with the work plan and thinking about, goals, objectives for this year is with these focus areas, recommending working groups or work streams, whichever you would prefer to use, streams or groups. But essentially having at least three of those for each of the key focus areas. And each of these working groups essentially being aligned to specific objectives. So really, when we think of working groups, I know that obviously we have these monthly calls. I'm sure we have other calls that we have on a daily basis. Not everyone's always keen on necessarily having another call, another meeting. But the working groups really, I think, are an excellent way to help foster that engagement from you all as the APP3 members. Stimulating creativity and using those opportunities to collectively brainstorm for any of these focus areas, as well as sub-focus areas. So I think the working groups is sort of our recommendation for moving forward. And we see this, in terms of the structure of the working groups themselves. We do have some initial list of considerations for requirements, expectations, but again, I would say we're well open to what folks would be interested in doing. So we see this as, each working group focusing on one of those topic areas. And then in terms of activities, requirements that the goals, objectives to accomplish by each working group, this could vary. So this is, I think, where that flexibility comes out. Obviously having regular working group meetings and for each of the sub-working groups would be one of those things. Whether it's thinking about, regularly scheduling or maybe one-off workshops, tabletops, exercises, whether it's reporting back here on those calls, on these monthly calls, sharing what, each of the working group is, working on, what are those goals, providing those readouts during these calls, these monthly meetings. It could also be more in terms of writing, thinking about journal publications, one-pagers, things that can be promoted on the GHSA website, as well as APP3 web page. If you have not visited that recently, I would definitely recommend that you do go to the APP3 webpage on the GHSA website. Thinking about speakers for these calls, speakers for whether it's specific to a sub-working group. Each working group is having their own calls and maybe featuring speakers on those calls, or again, thinking about the monthly meetings as well. We mentioned coordination, certainly with other action packages. Several of us are involved in those other action packages. And I think being able to share that intel that you hear, you learn, that comes up on those calls, and trying to find those ways of collaboration with those action packages, knowing that biosafety, biosecurity are certainly very much cross-cutting areas. So is there opportunities that, when we think of our focus areas, how can we enhance that collaboration with some of those other packages? So that's another area. And then really just thinking of overall coordination, communication, thinking about with each working group having its own activities, accomplishments, and sort of what that looks like when we think of advancing the GHSA 2024 targets, when we think of, the APP3 goals this year and what we want to try to achieve. So again, the working groups is sort of our recommendation of how we kind of move forward for each of these focus areas, but certainly welcome ideas that folks might have on the call. So Dr. Sepna, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sam. And again, the group will see all of this sort of spelled out in more detail in writing, because it's sometimes we know that it can be hard to react to things that you just hear verbally. So stay tuned for more there. Then if it's okay with everyone, we'd really like to move to our next agenda item. I think this could not be more timely, given some of the unfortunate events that we're seeing in Sudan. And so I'll actually sort of stop talking here. I'll turn it over to Julie to kind of lead us through this, but we're going to start with a poll of the group.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sapna. Jennifer or Sapna, are you able to project perfect, thank you. So the reason that we are raising this, as Dr. Sapna said, is that we are seeing only the most recent of a series of crises in which laboratories have been compromised, either by natural disasters that affect the physical integrity, and in some cases, the complete utility network that supports the all of the operational systems of laboratories, leaving them vulnerable to the loss of pathogens and leaving those pathogen collections vulnerable to loss in terms of both not being able to literally tell where they are and not being able to tell who might have access to the pathogens and what conditions they might be stored under. The recent events, we've seen the compromise of the biosafety and biosecurity systems in laboratories due to protracted conflicts or violence, in which in some cases it's really not clear whether the pathogen collections in the laboratory are compromised and whether the systems are in place. So what we really want to understand, I think, as a community is, are we planning sufficiently for what we think of in global health security as the public health emergency management practices, or in the laboratory sense, planning, developing contingency plans and integrating them into larger national planning for biosafety and biosecurity, and for the management of public health emergencies, so that we think about the role of the laboratories and how to protect them. So these polling questions are, our goal is to just understand, how are countries planning for incidents, whether they are naturally occurring or caused by human action, that potentially compromise the operations and infrastructure of laboratories, and what are the best practices or the tools that have been developed that could be shared and used to anticipate and manage these events. So what are the results looking like on the first poll?
So it looks like we actually have, for the first question on, has our country experienced a situation in which the infrastructure operations were compromised? 4 actually said yes, and 4 have said no. So we've got some yeses there.
All right, I know that a lot of us here are from the same countries, but anyone else want to respond to that question before we move to the next one?
Perhaps
All
someone
right,
who answered yes might want to chime in.
Well, Julie, I can actually share a US example if that would help.
Yeah, that would be great. I think that we've seen US examples from natural disasters, most certainly.
For sure. So I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but some years ago, actually now almost 15 years ago, in Galveston, Texas, so in the southern part of the excuse me, of the United States, there was a hurricane that actually endangered one of the major biosafety level 4 laboratories there. Now, this is an area of Texas that was known to be hit by hurricanes and some other kind of severe storms. And so when this laboratory was built, they thought ahead, fortunately, and thinking about, okay, how do we make sure that some of the more sensitive parts of the facility, your level 3, level 4 suites and such are built on the higher floors, but that you also make sure that your structure overall is as much as possible above sea level, right? Recognizing you're on a coastal city. And so a massive storm hit, hundreds of millions of dollars in damage and such across the kind of campus and such where it's on. But fortunately, there wasn't any compromise in terms of loss of pathogen control. Unfortunately, they lost some of the, test animals and other samples and such, but there wasn't then a sort of a dangerous situation and such for the community. And so it was both a matter of kind of pre-planning, even just getting into when you're building this kind of infrastructure and you sort of know the environment that you're working in. But importantly too, is the protocols and such that the laboratory and the surrounding kind of campus had in place of, if there's an emergency, if you can see something coming, how do you make sure that you maintain things like biosafety, biosecurity, integrity during a kind of a chaotic disaster?
And I think that's just to add a great example of applying public health emergency management principles to laboratory biosafety and biosecurity. Oh, okay, thanks. We see the next question is up. So does your country have national policies or plans for maintaining laboratory safety and security? And then does your, we have all the questions. Jennifer, would you mind just walking through the results so far for the poll?
I'm having
questions?
issues
It would be fantastic. I'm sorry.
Sapna, are you able to see them?
I am. Can everyone see the results?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Oh, okay, perfect. Yes. So, oh, excellent. Okay. So for question 2, does your country have those policies? 1 said yes. 6 said partial, that labs would fall under sort of general emergency response operations. Yeah. So that's the answer for 2. So 1 yes, but mostly partials.
Would the person who responded yes be willing to give just a very, very brief description of where that is encompassed, of what kind of national policy that's captured in? Shy group today. Okay. It would be, I think for today, we don't have a lot of time, and I understand that people weren't really prepared to talk through these details, but beginning to understand what we have in place, I think is really critical to figuring out how we can, as an action package, start, again, identifying practices that have been tested and validated and making those more widely available to our actors within the action package and those who would be stakeholders, even if they're not actively engaged right now. The third question, how are we on results there?
So a lot of partials again. So does your national biosafety and security planning framework include emergency preparedness? 3 yeses in this case, and the rest were partials.
Fantastic. All right. Again, is that the final question, please, Sapna?
And then there's one more to see, as your country developed any planning or training tools, a few yeses there, but actually the majority there is no.
Thank you so much. So we have very little time left. I would just ask very quickly, lightning round. In terms of gaps for managing or preparing for accidents or disasters that affect laboratory operations and integrity, lightning round, no wrong answers here. what are the biggest gaps? Is there anything that is a wish list that if you had an opportunity right now today to have a piece of guidance or a tool in your hand that you would want to see? You all realize I teach undergraduates, right? I am not above in an international setting making people speak.
I think next time the smaller breakout rooms might be a better idea. If people don't want to share in the large group, maybe they might be more comfortable in small groups.
That's a great idea, Jennifer. I think it would be wonderful to have this discussion in breakout sessions, and then maybe if everyone is comfortable reaching out between sessions just to get a little bit of feedback, it would be great to identify some of these tools that countries have developed.
I agree.
All right, I won't throw chalk today, metaphorically.
And some people might not have been able to see the results of the poll. I only saw it when Sapna reshared it. Sorry. So maybe that could have been an issue.
No worries. That certainly sounds like, though, there's plenty of fuel for sort of future conversations, and potentially this could be one of those topics that we address during our working groups in the months and such to come. So recognizing that we've just got a couple minutes left, unfortunately, we're not going to take a lot of time, I think, today to talk about some of the any other business. But if you have programmatic updates or events that are upcoming and such that you would like to share with the broader group, as always, feel free to both drop them in the chat, or you can, of course, email them to us as the co-chairs and to our NTI colleagues, and we can distribute those with the minutes. And really, that's something that we can do for every meeting. So again, recognizing sometimes people are not able to get onto the monthly call or sort of unable necessarily to speak up and such. And so if you have updates, if you've got things that you really want to be able to share, the distro is yours, right? Feel free to ping it, but also feel free to send things to us in advance, and we'd be happy to either brief on the activities or the upcoming events during the meeting itself, or of course be able to capture it in the meeting minutes. So one point of scheduling that we want to make sure that we note, and sorry to be a little disruptive 2 months running, but due to the scheduling of the World Health Assembly this year towards the end of this month in late May, we are going to be sliding our next call slightly to the right, probably about a week or so. So just as our April call was held in May, now our May call is going to be held in June, but hopefully we'll be able to get back on track later on this summer. So I just want to close with, again, thanking everybody, as always, for your participation and your involvement in this group. I'm so excited to be sort of really entering this this work with our GHSA consortium co-chairs, and of course with the rest of you. As always, feel free to send us comments, feedback, questions, and such that you might have. And we're just very excited to see where the group goes for the next several months. So with that, again, thanks everyone, and take care and be safe.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes, bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.